Okay, we'll do one more equation here, trying to graph a sinusoid. This time we'll do a cosine. We'll graph y equals -3 cosine 1/2 x plus 1. And before we start graphing, we got to take some notes. So let's do that. First of all, the number in front gives us our amplitude. So our amplitude is, it's actually 3, and the negative denotes that my graph is upside down, or it's a reflection in the x-axis. That's true with any function. It doesn't have to be a sine or a cosine. Anytime you put a negative in front of a function, it just flips it upside down. The next constant is the coefficient of x, that's b. And of course, b doesn't affect the graph directly. It's an inverse relationship. It affects the period. The period, don't forget, is 2 pi over b. Of course, that's in radians. In degrees, it'd be 360 over b. So here it's 2 pi divided by 1/2, which actually stretches the period out to 4 pi, right? So smaller numbers for b actually expand you horizontally. And finally, at the end, that's my d, that's my sinusoidal axis, or my midline. That's the middle of the y value. So the whole graph is basically shifted up 1 unit. All right. So we got all that, and what do we need? We need some graph paper, right? So just make your own. Give yourself an x-axis. Give yourself a y-axis, right? Again, it's not marked up because you can't mark it up until you do the homework, until you figure out these values. For instance, I always start with the period 4 pi. Yeah, so pick a fixed distance to the right, call it 4 pi. And then halfway, of course, would be 2 pi, and then -2 pi, -4 pi. And do your best, try your best to scale it appropriately. It's not perfect, but it'll do. And then what's your midline? Your midline's the middle of your y's, so let's call that 1. And then from there, I go 3 up, 3 down. So 3 up would take me to 4, 3 down would take me to -2, and 4 and -2 are my high and low values, right? Finally, what's the deal? It's a cosine. Remember, cosine should start at a high point. It should start at a maximum. But because of the negative, I'm going to start down at the bottom at a minimum. So I'm actually going to start the graph down here at -2, and then, your period's 4 pi, which means I'll repeat the low point at 4 pi and -4 pi. And because of the symmetry of these graphs, I'm pretty much done. In between those low points, I got to have a high point. So at 2 pi and -2 pi, I got to be up at 4. And then don't forget, and maybe I'll faintly highlight this in yellow, which will barely show up, but this yellow line just denotes the midline of my graph. So it's up at 1. So halfway between, so really at -3 pi and at +3 pi and at 1 pi and -1 pi, I would hit the midline, which happens to be 1 up there. And if I connect these blue dots with a nice smooth continuous curve, I'm going to have my cosine graph. Right there it is. Okay, that's putting it all together. Hopefully that video helped you out a little bit.